Hello, my name is Caroline Henderson. I am an ordinary 62-year-old woman who tragically lost her son and daughter-in-law in a catastrophic accident. I now have the responsibility of caring for my granddaughter. Child Protective Services officials are taking the child away, claiming that I am unable to raise her. During the trial, the judge gave the child an opportunity to speak. The girl's words left everyone puzzled. The Henderson family was far from ordinary. They lived in the suburbs of Vancouver, located in Canada. The mountains were not only a source of income for the couple, but also the invigorating force that propelled them forward. They had the unique role of mountain guides, taking small groups of tourists to discover the hidden wonders of this little-known region of the country. As they explored the enchanting night trails in search of the awe-inspiring northern lights, hikers of all ages were filled with childlike wonder. Several dropped to their knees, silently watching the ever-changing sky overhead. Others expressed their gratitude with tears in their eyes, which filled the couple with a sense of pride and mattered more than any monetary reward. Nevertheless, the career the couple decided to pursue was extremely dangerous. Every time they set out on a hike, they were in for a lot of trouble. From thrilling bear encounters to falling into ice crevasses and treacherous avalanches. On a beautiful day with temperatures of 4 degrees Celsius, the pair were leading the group through the mountains when an unpleasant incident occurred with one of the hikers. Due to their careless actions, they had no choice but to stay in the young man's company until help arrived. Given his ankle injury, he was unable to walk. The rest of the group successfully descended the mountain with the help of an additional guide and a 45-minute wait. The weather on this cold mountain became threatening. The winds picked up, causing the temperature to drop significantly. The couple wanted to not cause the young man any unnecessary worry, but they couldn't ignore the fact that these conditions could have escalated into a serious problem. Rescuers, both air and ground, had to wait for the weather in the city below to calm down before they could climb the mountain. The sudden snowstorm had already caused chaos and disorder. In just a few minutes it had swept across the mountain, leaving nothing behind. 13 long hours later, when the strong winds finally subsided, a rescue helicopter flew up to the spot where the 3 men were anxiously awaiting their rescue. The team hovered over the area, checking for signs of life. The rescuers bravely descended from the helicopter, determined to find the missing people. However, their efforts were fruitless. No trace of the missing people could be found and their calls went unanswered. After 20 minutes of searching, the rescuers were about to return to the helicopter and survey other parts of the mountain. At that moment one of them noticed a glove lying on the ground. Carefully touching the glove, he carefully removed it, exposing the outstretched arm connected to it. Unfortunately, rescuers arrived too late. The couple had a 4-year-old daughter named Nancy. She was with a babysitter, as usual, as the couple had work commitments. The police contacted the girl's grandmother, Caroline Henderson, to break the sad news. Caroline, an energetic and active woman aged 64, had a strong bond with her family. She communicated regularly with her son and granddaughter via video link, taking time out from home to support her husband, who uses a wheelchair. Henry Henderson. Hi, Caroline. She was in the middle of her workday at a travel agency when a surprise visit from the local police chief brought terrible news: the tragic deaths of her son and his wife. Caroline was beyond distraught and could not hold back her tears, even in front of her clients. She had never experienced such a deep and overpowering wave of sadness. Amidst the somber atmosphere of the funeral, Caroline noticed that Nancy remained silent and tearless. "Darling, I am beside you. Grandma will always be by your side," Caroline whispered, hugging her granddaughter tightly and giving her comfort. Despite Caroline's best efforts, the girl's life was on the verge of major upheaval. Caroline's house was small and Nancy could no longer boast of her privacy. Her grandmother's financial situation was different from that of the girl's late parents. Therefore, she had no choice but to interrupt her French lessons and transfer her to another school. Caroline was well aware that these difficult circumstances were not the right time for further changes in the girl's life. However, the salary she received at the travel agency was barely enough to cover her expenses and the cost of her husband's medication. Nevertheless, the grandmother worked hard to provide the girl with comfort and give her a sense of support. Caroline diligently got up every morning to lovingly prepare breakfast for her granddaughter, as well as purchase new toys in town. The grandfather did his best, but his disability did not allow him to participate in the games that the girl enjoyed with her father, such as running around the house with her in his arms, playfully tossing her back and forth. It had been several months since the girl had settled in her grandmother's house, and Caroline could not shake off a feeling of deep uneasiness. A whole year had passed since the incident, and Nancy had not uttered a word. "Esther, I must confess I am very much disturbed." Caroline spoke to her colleague Esther. She suggested that the silence was typical for a 4-year-old. Perhaps it was her unique approach to dealing with trauma. "Oh, that's unfortunate. Isn't it?" the woman exclaimed. However, this thought had often crossed Caroline's mind. She believed that all the mistakes and blame lay with her. Caroline's anxiety increased when Nancy's new school teacher called the grandparents' house, insisting on an urgent conversation with the girl's mother. Caroline was hesitant to reveal the whereabouts of Nancy's mother and instead assured her that she was capable of handling the situation. "However, I have a question for you. How does she behave when she is at home? Does she communicate effectively with you? Does she regularly participate in games?" the teacher inquired. When Caroline answered that the girl had not yet started talking, things went downhill. "Oh, ma'am. However, this is far from normal. A girl her age is supposed to be able to communicate and express herself clearly." The teacher advised that she be taken to a doctor immediately for a thorough examination. Caroline was able to make an appointment that same week. The pediatrician's gentle approach during the consultation and examination gave the grandmother a sense of confidence. "I apologize, Mrs. Carolina," the doctor said, while Nancy was frolicking in the waiting room. "However, her symptoms are very similar to those of a child experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. She is in excellent physical health. However, the unfortunate events that befell your son and daughter-in-law were undoubtedly tragic, and it is imperative that we recognize that." The doctor emphasized the importance of closely monitoring Nancy's condition to prevent possible long-term problems. Caroline felt a deep sense of fear and anxiety, desperately trying to figure out how to support her granddaughter's speech development and help her regain her former sociability. The doctor's advice was to give her lots of attention. Be sure to talk to the girl regularly. Constantly encourage her with words. Even if she does not respond. With time, her speech skills may improve. He also advised to see a psychologist regularly. Every problem has a solution. However, Carolina quickly came to the realization that there were two things she needed. She lacked both time and money. Devoting all her time to Nancy would be quite labor-intensive. She was working, and the cost of seeing a psychologist would be a financial burden on her grandparents. Later that day, Caroline spoke to her husband, expressing her uncertainty about how to handle the situation. "I will get a job if I have to. I realize that some may be hesitant to hire someone with my physical limitations, but I intend to do my best. We are here for our granddaughter, who has survived everything life has dealt us." The man confidently took his wife's hand. Caroline found some comfort in Henry's unwavering determination, but in truth the situation was far more dire than she had realized. The grandparents had skillfully struck a delicate balance between socializing with their granddaughter and respecting her need for privacy, providing her with a perfect combination of support and independence. They did everything possible to make Nancy feel not only comfortable, but also loved and protected. Despite their affection for the girl, one-on-one conversations with her proved tedious. However, she was making significant progress. The girl's desire to express herself was evident. Caroline and Henry were fully prepared to give up everything for their beloved granddaughter. Nancy's face lit up with joy when the old lady found herself in the kitchen, telling them stories from her youth and preparing delicious meals. The shyness that had once held Nancy back was slowly disappearing, replaced by a growing sense of happiness. Caroline's unwavering devotion to her granddaughter overlooked the impending changes that were about to take place in her life. On Friday, the owner of the travel agency called Caroline into her office and broke the news of her dismissal with the utmost candor. Her grandmother's face showed a look of quiet amazement. She realized that in the past few months she had been spending less time at work. She preferred to leave earlier when the traffic was busier and arrive later on days when there were fewer people. Still, it was known that she had a child waiting for her at home, and people assumed they understood the dedication it took to care for her granddaughter's mental well-being. "Caroline, this is a business. No business can survive without delivering results." "It really is." Caroline was stunned. To be unemployed at this point was simply impossible. The director argued that the older woman's performance had declined, which meant she was no longer as motivated and productive as she used to be. Caroline, with her 12 years of agency experience, wanted a straightforward and confident explanation. She realized that her performance alone could not directly affect the agency's financial results. Should I state the obvious directly? You've been with the company for a long time, but your performance may not be at the level it used to be. You seem to be behind the times. Besides, it seems like your mind is on something else. As of Monday, your college colleague will take over your position. We regret to inform you that your employment has been terminated without any alternatives. Caroline begged to keep her position. She tearfully expressed her concern that without a salary she would not be able to support her husband and granddaughter. However, all she received was additional criticism from her demanding boss. This girl is not even your daughter. Consider finding her a loving home through adoption, and trust that the universe will guide her path. Caroline hurriedly withdrew, keeping her gaze on him. She couldn't bear to be in the presence of this horrible woman for another minute. She didn't know how to cover the cost of her granddaughter's psychological treatment and the medication her husband needed. She did not know how to break the news to her husband, and she had to muster all her inner resolve to return home. During the return trip, however, Caroline had plenty of time to think about the plan. Without a moment's hesitation, she returned home and set off again. She diligently went door to door on her street and then throughout her neighborhood, politely asking about job opportunities and distributing her contact information. She spoke enthusiastically about her various skills and experiences, emphasizing that she could do well in a variety of roles such as cleaner, maid, cook, and even caregiver. She was willing to try anything. Ultimately, she needed the financial means to provide for her loved ones. Unaware of Caroline's ignorance, Henry made a sincere effort to keep his promise. He reached out to all his acquaintances in hopes of finding some work. The grandfather treasured the bond with his granddaughter and was determined to protect the progress they had already made. Despite the man's optimistic outlook, the family's trials and tribulations were far from over. Caroline did not get a long-term job, but began offering her ironing and laundry services to several neighbors. One day, when she found herself swamped with a multitude of chores, she heard the sound of the doorbell. Caroline hurried to open the door, but found herself face to face with a Child Protective Services agent with a complaint in hand and a court order to take the child away. "Hello, ma'am. We recently received a complaint from the school regarding your ability to provide a suitable environment for a child in your home. Upon investigation, it was discovered that she is not very social and rarely speaks. As a consequence, she has been the victim of constant bullying at school. In addition, you are a mature woman who is not currently working but is caring for an elderly person who uses a wheelchair. It looks like it won't be long before this child goes without food or we start an investigation. However, our first priority is to make sure that the child is taken to a suitable shelter. Rest assured, she will be in our capable hands while you appeal to the courts." According to the agent, Caroline experienced a sudden tremor throughout her body, causing her to become temporarily paralyzed. She attempted to physically get between the officer and the girl, but was stopped by the presence of a second officer. The girl did not respond in any way, further supporting the allegations of her inattention in this situation. The Child Protective Services officer then removed the girl from the situation, and the expression on his face toward the grandmother was filled with despair. The girl had no desire to leave. Caroline was deeply upset when her husband abruptly awoke from his nap. He was deeply shaken by the news and cried beside his wife. He struggled to find words to comfort his wife at that moment. His only option was to hire a public defender and fight to be reunited with his granddaughter. The weeks that followed seemed devoid of life and vibrancy to him. Everything seemed to come to a sudden halt. "I refused to let them separate me from my beloved granddaughter. I may not have done everything as well as I would have liked, but I was moving in the right direction. We need each other. And I will demonstrate that to anyone who needs it." Caroline muttered to herself as she looked in the mirror and prepared for the court hearing coming up in 2 hours. She told the judge her entire story, from the tragic death of her son in a mountain accident, her dismissal from the travel agency, and the sudden appearance of the police at her door. After hearing her story, the judge called the girl in and spoke with her. "Hello, young lady. How are you doing? How are you being treated? Are you being taken care of?" A quiet and peaceful home of loving grandparents. There was silence in the room. The girl kept a solemn expression on her face. He leaned over and furrowed his eyebrows, contemplating his next steps. He decided to question the child further. Do you feel a deep affection for your grandmother? The woman is sitting right in front of you. The girl bowed her head silently, giving no answer. Finally, the judge asked that if there are any positive things to say about your grandmother, they should be said at this point. If there are no positive points, it is better to refrain from talking. The girl's silence gave the judge the confidence needed to reach a verdict. In the end, it was decided that Caroline was not fit to care for a child. And it would be better if the girl continued to live in an orphanage. Oh, no, I really don't want that to happen. I need her presence. Yes, of course you do. Caroline's desperate pleas went unanswered. The public defender who accompanied her was silent and offered no assistance other than to schedule a hearing. Meanwhile, Caroline was escorted out of the room by 2 officers to prevent further argument. Amidst the despair and dashed hopes that filled the room, a faint and surprising voice burst from the back rows, ringing in the ears of all present with unwavering clarity. Please, I beg you, do not separate me from my beloved grandmother. There was a brief pause as everyone exchanged glances. The girl's confident words had the whole room in awe. I would love to spend time with my grandmother. She repeated her affectionate words, once again expressing her love for her grandmother. The sitting judge suddenly hissed in a fit of coughing. Caroline managed to escape from the clutches of the guard, tears streaming down her face. She rushed to the girl and hugged her tightly, vowing never to let her go. Caroline decided to go directly to the judge. He had already made his decision, though. The man was compassionate, reconsidering his decision and preventing further harm to the family, and ultimately decided not to grant any more custody to the grandmother. He then expressed concern about her termination and in a casual conversation advised the woman to sue the travel agency that had fired her and her former supervisor because they had clearly violated labor laws and discriminated against Caroline. She agreed with the advice and filed a complaint. A few months later, the elderly woman won her legal battle with her former employer and received the compensation she deserved. She was able to create an extra room in her home specifically for her granddaughter. After receiving a portion of her lawsuit compensation, she rightfully earned the opportunity to spend a lot of time with her granddaughter. She motivated her to express herself more and more, assuring her that her past traumas would be overcome. In Caroline's opinion, her future would be filled with countless moments of happiness and affection. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a comment and have a great experience.